everyone's safety in our immediate environment is also our responsibility. I take care of you, you take care of me.
If the tables turn, then you're going to get the brunt of it all.
He has the power and other countries are begging.
Unless we get Elon Musk on our side, Trump seems to be listening to him a lot more. Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another episode of Beyond the Headlines, the go-to space for the top stories that made the headlines and more. My name is Amalina Kamal.
And I'm Hazrin Hassan. Today we start with a troubling case. Pamela Ling, a key witness in a corruption probe, disappears, snatched in broad daylight outside the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission's headquarters.
Eyewitnesses say that abductors wore police uniforms and weeks have passed before the public even knew of the news. Now, to discuss the current safeguards for witnesses in ongoing investigations and areas that need urgent strengthening, here on set we have Associate Professor Dr. Keshina Ayu Mat Saad, who is the EXCO member of the Malaysian Crime Prevention Foundation, as well as the chairman of the Anti-Trafficking in Persons and Anti-Smuggling of Migrants Committee. Welcome, Doctor, to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure to have you. Now, Doctor, this Pamela Ling abduction, it has all the makings of a Netflix movie, if you will. She's a key witness in a corruption case and money laundering case involving a high-profile businessman, in this case, her husband. She was last seen in Putrajaya, where she was taken from her e-hailing ride just outside the MACC headquarters. How does this even happen in a city like Putrajaya, where it's the most surveilled city in the country? You have cameras on every street corner.
Right.
There are several things to consider. Number one is public apathy. Because of how nowadays people are, very commonly see crime documentaries, real crime occurring and being shared on, for example, Facebook, whatever programs we have online. So there is people become more and more usual, more and more common to see it. They might think that is a prank. That's pretty common.
Okay.
Perceive it as a prank. They see it as none of their business. Public apathy. Someone else will make a report. It can be because they see when a woman is taken out, it must be a matter between her and her family. So it's possibly a domestic issue. So I don't want to get involved in it. So you can see there's so many possible answers to why it was informed so late. In fact, in many instances of so-called abduction, it is likely that cases are taken seriously after some time. Even when a child is abducted, most often than not, a time frame of at least several hours are taken into consideration before the report is made. Because the logic behind that would be, probably my child went to his or her friend's house and just did not inform me. So they will wait. Unfortunately, during that time of waiting, something which we are not hoping to happen, unfortunately happens. What more so when it involves adults? It's a different case when an abduction involves a child and adoption that involves an adult. Yeah, so in adult circumstances, it could be voluntary leaving, even though it may be perceived like someone is pulling her or him into another vehicle. There have been too many instances whereby we assume that it's like a daylight kidnapping or abduction, but no one does anything.
Right.
And this does not only happen in Malaysia.
Yeah. But in the case of Pamela Ling, right, so eyewitnesses did say that abductors wear police uniform. So how can we actually educate the public better, even in that sort of scenario? What are the red flags that should be identified to know that this is basically not what it seems, so that we don't fall into this bystander effect that you just mentioned about?
Yeah. With regards to what people need to know is that they need to be able to identify, is this definitely a uniform that is associated with a certain organization, or is it not? Because sometimes they just say it's the same color and equate that color with an organization. For example, is it the police, or is it, for example, from a well-known organization dealing with security, for example? They look at the clothes, this must be a security officer. Yeah, but they don't look into the details. For example, the badge.
Right.
the body number. So each officer, they have their own number. So is it there? So if these little things are missing, then it's most likely that members of the public will believe what they see without question. Now, my team, Forensic Science in USM, we did a study early this year with regards to misinformation effect, and we compared between males and females. So there are clear differences despite what is shown, what has been reported elsewhere in parts of the world. For example, the Malaysian women are more likely to remember colors. The males would remember other details, for example, vehicles. Yeah, so the study that we did earlier this year, we actually found out that the women were able to identify what the victim was wearing, how many victims, whether there was blood or not, what were the clothes that the suspect were wearing. When we asked the male who reported on that crime scenario that we got and showed to them, they remembered details like the car make, whether the car was tinted. So it is not really surprising when questions are asked of witnesses, they would recall different things depending on their gender.
How does profiling actually helps in the investigation itself, especially in cases of kidnapping such as this?
One major way that profiling can help is to make the pool of suspects smaller. Instead of calling in people who don't have the profile that we identify with for specific cases, we can make it smaller, yeah? In the sense that, for example, this person has a tattoo. So we're not going to call someone who doesn't have a tattoo to come in. And this person has certain characteristics. They have, for example, short hair, 5'1", 5'2", small body, for example, or big body. So we can, in fact, save time when we integrate people. Now, again, this is something that is a big difference between the genders, because females are better at looking into these things and remembering those details.
And in the case of Pamela Ling, right, it's only after weeks that the public or the general public knew of her abduction. You would think that the people around her will also be notified. I mean, we've seen reports that her father did say that this is out of character for Pamela herself, right? Why is there this level of like nonchalance still happening, right? If a person is missing even way beyond 48 hours, how can we be better at that?
For one thing, we need to bring back cultural values that are caring about people in our own environment. More and more Malaysians are moving towards me, myself, and I. So if it has no direct relation to me, let someone else handle it. So if more and more people are caring about other people in the environment, it is very likely cases like this would move forward more quicker. In the past, for example, if a child goes missing, the whole community will rush and search.
Yeah, I do agree. We have more urgency when it comes to
Yes.
that, right?
But nowadays, when you hear about a child missing, maybe he or she is a bit late or walking back. So there's a difference in how we perceive urgency, in how we perceive seriousness of a certain incident. For example, in the case of kidnapping or abduction. When it comes to adults, because they have the ability to move, they have the ability to self-defense better than a child, so the circumstances would, of course, be different.
Now, Doctor, at least based on eyewitness accounts who saw Pamela Ling being forcibly taken out of her car ride, right? The alleged abductors, were seen wearing police uniform. And I think for bystanders who, if they happen to be there, it would be very easy for them to just shrug it off, think, oh, it's just the police, they're just doing their job, and ignore it. But perhaps, moving forwards, to be better informed as members of the public, is there a distinction that we should be informed about between, a case of a crime, in this case, an abduction, and differentiating that between from the police arresting someone?
Number one is that everyone needs to be aware about the environment.
Okay.
That's the most important thing. But we can see it literally everywhere. People are more focused on their handphones, on their gadgets.
Okay.
So they forget about the environment, hoping that other people are aware about them. Ironically, other people in the surroundings have that same mentality. So let me look at my gadget, let me look at my handphone, and hoping everyone else around them will be aware of what they're doing. So there's a lot of potential conflicts that occur because everyone is minding their own business without taking into consideration about their environment. That's number one. Yeah. Number two, when we look into the context, if it is suspicious, make a police report. But many people will think back, should I make a report? Should I not make a report? And time goes by. So when they are finally convinced to make a police report, unfortunately, it's too late. So not only do people need to be aware of the environment, okay, put time away from your gadget, from your handphone. If you're in a public space, for example, walking, going to your car, for example, you don't have to look at your handphone. Your safety is paramount. So this will enable you to watch your surroundings to see if there is any suspicious activities going on.
Do you agree with having to basically turn on your location and share it with your immediate family members? Because I know certain devices does that, right?
Yeah.
I personally have that in a sense, but I don't share it with just about anybody. It's just two people.
Yep.
That's close to me. So in the situation something happened to me, it doesn't necessarily have to be like criminal in that sense. For instance, I go for hiking and I get injured or something like that, then at least if I am not reachable, people would know my last scene.
Yes, definitely.
So,
yeah.
Or do you think that's a breach of privacy?
No, I think that is one of the most proactive ways forward to safeguard your own safety, because there have been instances in the past where a person's last known location has helped to solve cases, has helped to enable other people to find them. Being lost in the jungle, for example, they fell. There was an accident on the road. They fell into the valley or something, or they fell into the drain and they were unconscious and they could not be contacted. So that is quite informative, quite helpful, not only to the police but also for the loved ones who are waiting for them and they never turned up.
Understood. Well, we've talked about the interventions that can be done on an individual level, community level, but let's talk about basically the authority level right here. Well, considering the delayed disclosure of the case, how important is institutional transparency in ensuring public trust and timely responses during potential abduction situation?
In any case, integrity must be number one. In whatever agency, whether it's government or private, integrity is vital because it leads to people's acceptance of your reputation, whether you are reliable, whether you're trustworthy, whether you can actually carry out your job, your duties. So it's not one or two, it's across the board. Whether it's school, whether it's a business entity, integrity is very important. Because if integrity is spot on, then a lot of problems could have been avoided right from the beginning.
But we've seen now that even the MACC chief having to answer that it's not our fault that it happened beyond the perimeters of the boundaries of the headquarters, right? Because basically it's beyond their control. What do you have to say about that?
There are limits to what anyone can do, whether as a private citizen or whether they are part of an organization. So if it's beyond the premise, for example, when you get gangsterism, so it happens outside the school gates. How would the people in the school, in the classes themselves, control for that? So there are limits, unfortunately, to this situation. So in a way, having CCTV is a pretty good idea. It provides evidence. But even then, the level of the quality of CCTV is vital to ensure whether or not it can be used in court. Because sometimes the CCTV of the quality is so grainy, so vague, you can't make out details. So there is limit to what anyone can do as a private citizen, as a government officer. You cannot. It's not a simple case of blaming who is at fault. Now, the crime has occurred. For example. So we have to move forward to solve it. But of course, the most important element is to prevent it from happening in the first place. So everyone needs to be mindful. And yes, bring back the quality of taking care of everyone else as well. Not only me, myself, and I. So it needs to have a mutual understanding in all levels of society that everyone's safety in our immediate environment, especially children, is also our responsibility. I take care of you, you take care of me.
Right.
If it's just I take care of myself, you take care of yourself, well then.
Right. But I guess I suppose it's because, you know, in why people have this mindset is because people are more defensive. Obviously, at the end of the day, if if the tables turn, then you're going to get the brunt of it all, right? You're going to have to face the music after that if it turns out not to be something what you thought it would be.
Also, the thing is that people tend to try to find whose fault. It's easy to try to put blame on someone without actually knowing the backstory, what is actually happening behind the scenes. It's very easy to point fingers. Oh, this person's at fault, that person's at fault, this society is at fault, that NGO, this school, this university, whatever it is.
It doesn't help the investigation. Right?
Yeah,
it doesn't help. It
It
doesn't,
doesn't
help
help.
the victim even.
It doesn't help at all.
But Doctor, if I may, I want to just go back again to this question I asked you previously about the distinction between how the public can differentiate between whether it's an abduction or an arrest, right? There should be a clear distinction, right, between what an arrest typically looks like,
correct,
and what sort of a
Abduction.
crime sort of abduction looks like. So in the case of when a police conducts an arrest, how can we, with as the limitations that we have, how can we as members of the public assess how much force is used in the arrest? Is that possible?
Force is very subjective.
Okay.
But what we can do is to ask for documentation. There will be a warrant of arrest.
So that's the first thing
That's
that
the
you
first
should check
thing,
for.
yeah. So if you want to see a difference between abduction, kidnapping versus an arrest, there will be a warrant of arrest. And the police, or any party for that matter, have to verbalize it and show the document. Yeah, and it's a legal document, then you can arrest the person. So if it's just taking this person, saying a threat to this person, for example, taking someone's IC away, the license away, that itself is a crime. So if someone just grabs your IC, you grab your driving license and runs away with it, that's definitely a crime.
Definitely, yeah.
It's definitely a crime.
Right.
So say if there were witnesses there, as it happens, you could, as a member of the public, be a sort of, I guess, in a way to put it, a vigilante and say, hang on a minute,
that's wrong.
can I see the warrant
Warrant
first?
of arrest? Yes.
Are you doing something
Yeah.
that's legal here?
Yeah.
Or you can do that, right?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
And if you think it's suspicious, you can do citizen's arrest.
Oh, okay.
You can. But of course, you call the police, wait there until the police come. Don't be 1 kilometer away. So how are you going to have the evidence in front of you?
How can we differentiate between being a vigilante and having to participate in citizen arrest?
It depends on the context and situation. Some people are very proactive in this. Anything and anything they see, or I must call the police.
Right.
You have some people, no lah, I don't want to make a report. They see a lot of bad things going on in their life, but they never make a police report. They might be fear of the police, for example. They don't want to go to court, for example. There are 1,001 reasons that anyone can possibly give for not making a report, for example. In fact, our program, Forensic Science of USM, together with Malaysia Crime Prevention Foundation, over the years, have and will continue to conduct workshops on educating the public on how to write a police report. So that always gets a lot of audience coming in, because they want to make a police report, but they do not know how to make the report. And we've had the audience before saying and asking to us, should I make a report?
If they're in this situation,
Yeah.
should I make a
Shouldn't-
report?
Yeah.
Okay,
So we
understood.
teach the members of the public, yes, you definitely have to make a report, even if you have just a grain of suspicion. Whether the report is taken up for further investigation is secondary, but at least you make a report, because that report is vital to enable the police to make investigation. They can't investigate without it.
That's right.
Right.
So it's all tied in.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't even talked about the matter of the motives for adoption. Because until now, some cases, you don't have any ransom note. So there are always questions, why was this person kidnapped or abducted?
Yeah, so in that case, there's no ransom note, there's no trace. Does it, or the possibility of having the outcome of this being a hit job, you get what I mean?
Yeah, I
like
do.
The outcome of the victim potentially being deceased.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a link to that?
The study that my team did several years ago for the police, Selangor in fact, that was quite some time ago, we identified quite a number of motives. So you have money or property base, you have not from money or property, and the third, which is pretty big, it is various motives for the abduction per se. So if it's with regards to money or property, normally they would definitely ask for ransom. Or it is because this person, the family member maybe, did not pay a debt. So that's why that individual was abducted. If it is about ransom or because of repayment of debt, you have three conditions. One, returned safely, unharmed. Second, returned with some harm. Bruises, injuries, for example, a lost limb, for example, because it has happened before. Third, left elsewhere to be found. And the fourth, because of ransom debt, they got the money or they did not get the money. This person, unfortunately, is not returned. And later we find this person beside the road or in the jungle, in somewhere found to be, unfortunately, deceased. So if it is money, property based on commodity, in dealing with adoption due to money or property, they want a certain amount of share, a power, for example, properties. It could be likely the not returned part is that they're killed, they're abused, and then they die because of that, unfortunately. It could be that they are sold, in other words, trafficked, given to others for other nefarious purposes. They've been traumatized, they've been kidnapped, they go to another country, a neighbor country, and then forced into criminality. So that falls under forced criminality. That is a big portion taken care of, looked into by a TIPSOM. TIPSOM of many countries surrounding in Southeast Asia looks into forced criminality, whereby youngsters, people get offered jobs overseas. They go and actually, unfortunately, fall into a bad crowd because they've been put into situations they have to ask and become like Macau scammers. A lot of scammers.
Right,
So they're forced into that life.
Right.
Or it could also be possible that they are forced into sex trade. Unfortunately, for women and young boys, quite surprisingly, a number of them, unfortunately, young boys. Or it can be also organ harvesting. So on the second type of motive, when it does not involve money or property, it could be a family member who did it, or a business associate.
Well, in the case of Pamela Ling, yes, police did earlier in the week said that the husband is part of the suspect list for her abduction. He's not been pinned yet, and the investigations is still ongoing. And at least as of the current news, police also did say cops have pieced together partial photo fit of one suspect. Maybe Dr. Gashina, because this just came in. How would a photo fit actually help a case? Because I know in many instances, when you are robbed or whatever, your memory is very vague, right? It's all cluttered and very fuzzy.
There's a reason for it.
Yeah, and then this partial photo fit, we're not even sure when was it recorded. It's supposed to be taken fresh, right? Correct me if I'm
Not
wrong.
necessarily. No, not necessarily. You find more and more often now, compared to 3, even 4 years ago, where snatch theft, they would harm or cause injury to their victim. Because when you're injured, not only in traumatized because you're being a victim of a robbery or snatch theft, when you're injured, you focus more on the pain that you experience. So your recall of who did the crime will be vague.
Right.
I see.
And two, when you are injured, people, bystanders, will help the victim rather than chase after the person. So I don't know whether you want to put it in, because I don't want to give people ideas with regards to how to
No,
commit
that's
a
fine,
crime.
because I think in terms of educating the public, now we understand why these things are sort of rising, trending, and there's a rise in these more violent thefts.
Yeah, even in cases of where you're threatened, say for example, taking away someone's IC, taking someone's license, that fear will cause you to have it will affect your memory. So you cannot recall the exact details of the
So
suspect.
these are all part and parcel of the post-traumatic
experience.
stress.
But when
and-
you say post-traumatic stress, you need a 6-week time
Mhm.
to be enabled to say this is definitely post-traumatic stress disorder.
Perhaps you can tell us, like, when, whether it's an adult or a minor, when it comes to someone who's been missing, for quite a length of time, where's that sort of turning point where you would think, like, for example, I mean, we don't have to base it on the Pamela Ling's case, but in her case, she's now been missing for a month. It will be a month tomorrow, or the day that this episode airs. So, usually, where's the turning point, the point of no return, and where at this point, authorities would sort of think chances of finding them alive.
A missing
very low.
report can be made within 24 hours. If it's a
Okay.
child, it's even less time. It used to be same 24 hours, but
Right.
now it's even less time.
Because every hour counts anyway.
Yeah, every hour counts for a child because of their being small, being innocent, being less physically able to fight off against the people who, say, for example, kidnap them. Yeah, with adults, it's a different scenario because they're older. They can think on their feet. Although sometimes people who are very afraid, they can't think on their feet. So the circumstances would differ. But the key point here is that within 24 hours.
But in the case of, let's say, this particular scenario where a person goes missing for a month or so, is it already like a, unfortunate to say,
Where's the turning point,
Yeah.
basically?
It depends on the
can't be
person.
like you authorities can't just be idling, and
It depends on
wait
who makes the
for-
report.
Right.
Yeah, because the study that my team did for police in Selangor, some parents delay reporting even weeks because sometimes they're so angry at the child. Let life teach them a lesson.
Oh,
When they
really?
experience it, then the child will come back lah. And then they normally say that the child was kidnapped by a man, ran away with a man, or with a friend. But actually, when my team did the investigation, the children ran away from home because of the hostile home environment. So sometimes people would delay making the report because then they know they are seen as a culprit.
It points back to them.
Yeah, because they are the source that caused the children to run away.
Okay.
With adults, it could be a conflict. So one party who fails to make the report, because then they say they'll be at fault for being the cause that the person ran away.
Right. Well,
So it's delay.
Yeah. Well, suffice to say, again, as you mentioned, make that police report if you do notice something out
Yes,
of
definitely.
the ordinary in that sense.
Yeah.
We have just a few minutes for about a couple of questions here, but I want to ask on you this, because another report that came in was that police did say that Pamela Ling is still alive and in the country. Now, Kuala Lumpur Police Chief Datuk Rusdi Muhammad Isa actually said this based on the fact that there was no notification from the immigration report or department report, right? So there was no official me leaving the country. So that is where they've identified that she's still here and alive, because there are cases of people who have been missing for a long time and still alive. He's just basing it off past trends of past cases.
Can't speak specifically about this particular case because it's an ongoing case, but in general, so in general, the longer the victim is missing, the less likely the person is going to be found alive.
Usually,
There have been
what's the
cases.
threshold?
There's no specific threshold because there have been cases where a child was kidnapped and then found in another country, found to be part of a begging syndicate.
All right.
Years would have passed.
Okay.
So there's no threshold. It has to be treated case specific. Because there are not that many kidnapping abduction cases, although what is perceived in social media, basically in social media, in the movies, it is as if kidnapping is so common. But it's not. There are more cases of, for example, abuse, domestic violence, rather than kidnapping, abduction.
I mean, running away from home. That sort of thing.
Many of the cases that we investigated, we've actually found out were cases of running away from home, and the parents failed to make the report because it will point back to them. for abusing their own children. So
I mean, because yes, it's underage and you are the guardian in that sense,
and they
right?
abuse and then the hostile environment at home, they say they can't stand it anymore, so they actually voluntarily run away.
Right. Well, although in certain cases whereby an instance there is no evidence of a person leaving a country, but based on your experience in the anti-trafficking committee, how easy is it to, slip through the cracks and leave the country
Unfortunately,
without being detected?
Unfortunately, the situation is not only in Malaysia, although we do have good border control. There are loopholes. Yeah, for example, if it's in the middle of jungle, we do not have a wall. We cannot take care of the entire length of the jungle, for example, 24/7. And also, like some places are islands. We cannot control for the entire place as well. So yes, loopholes do exist, gaps in the defense. But you can say this even for all other countries. For example, Indonesia. For example, even like Thailand, China, all these places. There is no way to control anywhere in the world that we say that people cannot come in or out. You have to only use the official channels. Because we have no walls surrounding.
I mean, it's likely if, again, I'm not trying to comment directly on Pamela Ling's case and be presumptive of an ongoing investigation. But, even though there are no official records, immigration records of her leaving the country, or in this case, of any missing person leaving the country, it doesn't mean that they couldn't have been smuggled out of the country, right?
Yeah, there's like waterways, rivers, the sea, the open ocean.
Right.
You don't have to, let's say, for example, you want to go to an island in Malaysia, you don't need to use a passport.
It's true.
Yeah, from there, it's just a boat and a ship away.
And probably a
For
feat
example.
for like the marine parks and everything.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And that's one of the cases that we found in Kedah. Unfortunately, many people were found deceased because they were trafficked from neighboring countries. And it's still ongoing. They found quite a number of bodies.
The mass graves? You're talking about the mass
You mean,
graves?
yeah.
Very shallow.
Right.
Right. Well, on that note, though, like, what can interagency collaborations do to prevent similar disappearance in the case of Pamela Ling and many others before this, to ensure accountability when cases involve possible impersonation, or if not impersonation, literal kidnapping happening?
There are interagency collaborations, not only within Malaysia, but also abroad. Yeah, but we can't handle cases all the time. For one thing, we're talking about the need for the agents to be hyper-vigilant 24/7. Now, these are human beings as well. So, unfortunately, there are cases that, slip through the cracks. It's not to point fingers whose fault it is. Collaboration is ongoing, but there are gaps that need to be filled. Completely. That's quite true. Yeah. For example, when we talk about the human resources, the need for them to have sufficient training, to be hyper vigilant. Yeah. So many factors in there. We need a superhero.
Right.
In other words.
Yep.
Yeah, because the cases are not to say that kidnapping or abduction happens so frequently, because that's not true. Yeah. Compared to other types of crime, abduction is not that common. So you have that same number of personnel having to deal with violent crime, domestic violence, abuse and whatnot, as well as abduction.
Okay.
So the range of crimes that they have to look into while safeguarding public safety with the same number of people. So yes, it's quite common that the members of the public want better authority, better safeguards in place. So sometimes, unfortunately, it's the public person, himself or herself, who creates the opportunity, enables victimization to occur. Yeah. For example, sometimes they will say, I will be here and here. And that is an opportunity wide open for someone to go to that person, spill acid, go kidnapping, break into that person's house, because the person is not there. Yeah.
Right.
Open up opportunities. Oh, I'm off to this country, that country. I won't be home for 2 weeks. Doesn't that create opportunity?
Yeah.
And then when you come home, your whole house, is a mess because criminals had break into your house and stolen your stuff. And then the neighbors will say, "Oh, I thought you are moving." So they came with a van, took out your important things, your furniture, or this person moving maybe.
Right.
And it has happened before.
Right. Serious considerations to make in terms of the opportunities or that we're giving to potential criminals, right? In that sense,
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, this is the end of our segment. Now, I'd like to thank our guest that's on set today, Associate Professor Dr. Kishina Ayu Matsayat. Thank you so much, Doctor, for
You're
your
welcome.
insights. I think we've covered the many layers of not just abduction, but the considerations before an abduction actually happened or a crime actually happened and what to do surrounding it.
Yeah, but I also like to add, for example, there are NGOs, like Malaysia Crime Prevention Foundation. We are literally in every state in Malaysia. So if you have doubt about how to go about things, if you need advice, for example, we do a lot of advocation, a lot of crime prevention activities. You are more than welcome to join us.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Great.
participate.
Yeah, participate.
Participate.
Yeah.
Care
Get the
and-
knowledge.
Yes. Yes. Be informed in that sense. And
Yes, correct.
I suppose the first step that you can do is how to write a police report, right? As you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Thank
we
you.
do that periodically.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much again, Dr. Kishina.
You're welcome.
And to our audience, stay tuned because we'll be back with our second segment of today's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Washington has been keeping us on our toes with sweeping U.S. tariffs now targeting almost all of Malaysia's exports, except semiconductors. Now, Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim has announced a 1.5 billion ringgit relief package for SMEs that will be hit by the reciprocal tariffs. Now, it is one of the 6 measures that the government has introduced to ensure economic stability and protect national interests in the short and medium term.
And as part of ongoing negotiations, the United States has made 4 key demands of Malaysia, aiming for a win-win outcome. Investment, Trade and Industry Minister Tengku Datuk Sri Zafrul Abdul Aziz says the demands involve non-tariff barriers, the trade deficit, protecting US technology and encouraging investment in American industries. Among the main sticking points are that US officials say Malaysia's halal import rules are stricter than international standards and that Bumiputra equity requirements in foreign-owned firms pose a trade barrier. These, Zafrul says, are among the reasons behind the 24% reciprocal tariff on Malaysian exports, with the US also citing a $25 billion trade deficit. Claims that the tariffs are linked to Malaysia's ties with China were dismissed by Zafrul, who said the issue never came up in his meetings with US officials. Another US concern is transshipment, where goods from a third country are routed through Malaysia to avoid American tariffs. To tackle this, starting May 6th, only MITI, the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry, will issue non-preferential certificates of origin or NPCOs for US-bound shipments, ending the role of appointed business councils and chambers. MITI says the move closes loopholes and reaffirms Malaysia's commitment to fair international trade practices. So there's certainly a lot to unpack here. And joining us in the studio today is geostrategist and Nusantara Academy for Strategic Research Senior Fellow Professor Dr. Azmi Hassan to help make sense of it all and what this means for US-Malaysia trade and our economy. Professor, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Right, now I want to start with the demands made by the US first. Now, these concerns over transshipment and falsely declared goods being shipped through Malaysia, these are of course valid concerns. And our government has now stepped up in terms of limiting it to only MITI as a sole issuer of the NPCOs. I mean, this should bode well, shouldn't it, for not just trade with the US, but for other countries too. These changes should be welcome, shouldn't they?
Yes, should be welcome, but we have been penalized for certain companies in China using us as a transit to avoid the tariff 100% plus. I think, yes, it is a plus. But when Tuku Zafrul said the NTB barriers are used as the base to compute the 24%, I like to contradict that. when President Trump first announced the 24%, they computed, originally it was 49%, and President Trump giving a discount of 50%, basically. But how they compute a 49% is that got nothing to do with NTB. It's got nothing to do with at the initial stage. It was computed by our trade deficit, or in our case, trade surplus, and minus the how much we import from United States. Then they do it percentage-wise. They got it 49%. So it's got nothing to do with NTB. So when they compute it, I think that's the reason why they have been very sloppy. One nation that are been inhabited by only penguins been put out a 10% tariff because they have been very sloppy when they compute it. Only the NTB came out, they need a justification for each nation. Why you are given 24%, why Vietnam is given 46%, they need some justification there.
But this came so much so like it's an afterthought, right? Did they even assess this even early on before imposing those things?
Yes, it was an afterthought. So when they said the NTB, they want to discuss NTB as mentioned just now about Bumiputra quota, Halal requirement, it's just an afterthought. They are using it as a leverage. But Tengku Zafrul said his discussion with his counterpart is being very positive. I'll take that word. It's being very positive. And Datuk Seri Anwar in Parliament said that most probably 24% will be reduced. How much reduced? We are not sure. So it has been a very positive input from Tengku Zafrul. So I take that as a positive step on our side.
Right. I mean, among the many things that Tengku Zafrul has also said is that Malaysia has received many complaints for our industry partners that the items are coming from other countries and stamped as if they come from our country. Now, of course, these are non-tariff issues, but you can see how this actually affects trade between us and US and other countries as well.
Correct.
So in this context, why is it an issue and why did we have to wait until the US decided to impose that 20% tariffs to do something?
Well, I think before this, yes, let's be honest, companies from China, they set up companies here, solar panel, for example. Solar panels, they produce it here, then they they export to United States.
Yeah.
So at that particular time, we have no tariff problem with United States. So I think the reason why Chinese companies set up is just to use us as our transit. So there's no problem to that. But only when Trump put out tariff on Malaysia and our solar panels exported from Malaysia will be put a special tariff, not 24%. I think much higher than 24%. So that's a lesson learned. As mentioned just now, MITI will produce a certificate, non-preferential tariff certificate. That shows our commitment that we are not a transit company that will be used by other countries.
Okay.
So I think that's a lesson learned, Amalina.
Just to follow up, don't you think that we are actually making or digging a lot of space for just to accommodate the US?
Well, in a way, because what we are trying to do is to reduce the 24% tariff. I think if 24% tariff is being kept as it is, no reduction, our SMEs especially will really suffer. So when you mentioned 1.5 billion has been, allocated for this particular issue, it's only a stopgap measures. I think so. We need we need to show that United States, we are trying to accommodate you. I think that's what Mr. Trump liked to hear, meaning that he has the power and other countries are begging. Well, if you want to say that Malaysia is begging, let it be. And today Mr. Trump announced that a trade deal with a very nice country, a big country, which is, he never mentioned which country, but it is a United Kingdom. So I think that's how Mr. Trump works, and we have to, maneuver how to deal with his staff in this case.
But okay, now given the circumstances, right, and I want to move on to one of the other non-tariff issues here, our strict halal rules for imports. Now, our halal certification standards are some of the highest in the world, if not the highest, the best actually, largely attributed to our very stringent approval process. And even beyond the halal certification, poultry processing plants in the US have to be registered with our veterinary department. And this alone can take months. And even after approval, the US poultry shipments undergo plant-by-plant inspections by our DVS and even JAKIM. this is what the US says makes it unfavorable to them, in terms of trade. So where do we draw the line here? How we're certainly not going to lower our standards or and give in to the US, but given the circumstances, do we have to now?
No, I don't think so. I think halal certification, I think our standard, our protocol should be the international standard because it's so complete from A to Z. So I guess if Australia can follow that particular halal certification imposed by us, then the United States, they should do so.
Right.
But when you mention the halal, the Bumi Putra requirement, actually that particular NTB has been resolved during Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiation 10, 15 years ago, where United States was part of it. But when Trump became the president in 2017, he pulled out United States from TPP,
Right.
which become CPTPP right now.
Right.
So in this case, I think they're trying to use old stories, old leverage. It's going to make a very difficult time for our negotiating team, which is headed by Datuk Masura from the TKSU from
Yep.
MITI, which is going to be very difficult. But again, as I said, Malina, Tengku Zafrul said it's very positive. So I'm holding his word right now.
But he himself has been very positive, especially across his socials as well, having to educate the general Malaysians, right, in terms of how the US tariff works and how it actually impacts consumers more rather than the businesses in themselves. But going back to the halal certification process, right, do you think Malaysia should justify it as a food safety or a religious standard or both? How should we go into this?
I think more toward food safety. If you put out the religious factor here, I don't think so the American will understand and appreciate it. They will never appreciate it. So we should put out the food safety because our halal certification, I think, similar to kosher. So we need to put out why we are more comfortable when you're overseas eating kosher is not much of the religion factor, but the safety procedure that was followed from the slaughter until repacking the meat itself. So I think to answer your question, Amalina, it is a safety regulation.
Right. But what about the government being open to recognizing halal certifications from reputable US bodies to streamline certain processes?
Yeah, I think that's the way to show, to demonstrate that we can negotiate, we can take it some of it, but not too stringent that we trying to lower our requirement here. So that's one way out, I guess, from certified. I think the most important thing is certified by JAKIM, especially that this particular certification company has been adhering to the halal needs.
If they're already looking at us as being tedious, when other parts of the world, they're looking at our halal standards or just processes as the, benchmark, right, to achieve. It just goes to show how they don't even look into this industry as important. So how should we even rationalize this with them?
Yeah, not rationalize, but how to educate them, I guess. So how to educate the American in this particular issue is that when they see halal, maybe the connotation is religion. Muslim religion. That's why kosher, we need, during our negotiation, we should use the kosher regulation in this case. It's all about safety regulation because our halal certification requirement is very, very, not stringent, but a complete, right from the start until the end of it when the meat, for example.
Comprehensive, I
it's
suppose.
very comprehensive. Though
right word.
There's a reason I think we need a very, very tactical how to not rationalize, as you mentioned, Amalina, but how to educate them. I think that's the most important thing.
I love how you're going with the whole positive outlook approach because, again, I feel like we're just making space for the demands from Washington.
Right. And now, Prof, I want to move on to the SMEs and the additional government support that the government has announced for them in soft loans and loan guarantees. How far-reaching is the 24% tariff, reciprocal tariffs on SMEs here, particularly those outside of the semiconductor sector?
Not only devastating for the SMEs, but for us consumer also, it will affect it negatively because basically it's going to make our product 24% much expensive. And I think Ford today announced that all their vehicles is $2,000 extra. starting from today, just because of this tariff
Okay.
that they import from Mexico and also from Canada, not from China. So for the consumer, for us, yes, it's going to be affected negatively, but for the country, the government will have less income in terms of our export products. So I think the SME is very important, but I think the government is trying their very best to expand the market. Because yes, the US market is very luxury. It's very luxury because the American, they like to spend.
Right.
Even though they are in debt, they will spend.
It's a capitalist nation anyway.
Yeah.
So.
So I think the government is trying to find a new market for our SME, not to depend on the luxury market of US. I think the GCC countries, the Arab countries, I think there's a huge market there. And next June, there will be a GCC summit together with ASEAN, together with China, together with Japan. I think that's part of our strategy to expand our market.
Right.
Okay.
Again, spin off to that, Malaysia's role as ASEAN chair, how do you think we are taking charge, especially in leading this particular bloc, navigating into the demands of US tariffs?
Yeah, when Prime Minister as a chairman said individual nation should have their own team, but they should be, the chairman advised, do not put another reciprocal tariff from each individual countries.
Okay.
And I think all 10 ASEAN countries agreed to that. So that's the reason why, because some question why Vietnam, they have their own negotiating team, Singapore have their own negotiating team, because the problem is that unlike European Union, is a blanket tariff, but for ASEAN, it's individual nation. I'm just keep wondering, when they put up this calculation for tariff, I think they did not realize ASEAN comprised of 10 nations.
Right.
They see that it's Southeast Asian. No, I mean, I think that's the way it is. That's the reason why the EU is a blanket tariff, all 27 nations. ASEAN, 10 nations, individual. I think they did not realize that ASEAN is part of a 10-nation organization. I think it's a blessing in disguise. I think it's not fair that we are trying to accommodate Laos, for example, 49%, something like that.
I mean, yeah, so apply those
Yeah, Singapore 10%. Of course, Singapore won't be agreeing that we talk with one voice because Singapore is only 10%. I think that's the reason why individual country have their own team.
Right.
Do you think it's in our best interest, though, to approach this en bloc as ASEAN? Rather than say, like you mentioned previously, we've had existing multilateral, we're part of multilateral trade pacts, right? But now that we are in ASEAN and we are the chair of ASEAN, shouldn't we make use of our position?
I think Malaysia should make use of it. I think when Malaysia, negotiate with United States, we have to put forward we are the chairman of ASEAN.
Right.
And as a chairman, we can set the agenda for ASEAN, whether to be closer to the Americans, whether to antagonize the American or closer to China. We should use that. But as you mentioned, to negotiate as en bloc, no, I don't think so. It wouldn't be fair. It won't be fair for Singapore, it won't be fair for Brunei, and it won't be fair for us. But for us, I think, senyap-senyap, we use the leverage as our chairman during negotiation. I think that's how. Because the most important thing is we want to reduce the 24%.
Okay, for us,
Yes, for us,
on a very domestic level, just to kind of push the significance of what Haswin just mentioned, because ASEAN as a region, we host over 600 million in terms of population, right? And we're the fourth largest economic sort of bloc.
Correct.
So this is one of the consideration in terms of how we want to go into negotiating this US tariff, whether or not we should go it and do it together, collectively. Do you think certain parts of the ASEAN nation should be more vocal about it?
Yes, I think when you mentioned exactly 695 million consumer, but the consumer, I was saying what you call the purchase power is not similar to the 300 million consumer of the United States. Of course, it's not similar. But again, when you mention the fourth biggest organization, not to forget that ASEAN is part of RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. That's the biggest FTA, together with China, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, Australia. So I think we can use that particular leverage as a chairman. But we are a team from Malaysia, but we can use that particular leverage as a chairman of ASEAN. We can show that 695 million we are a very huge bloc, we are the biggest FTA together with China. It's kind of leverage for us. So I guess when we negotiating, we need some positive leverage that what we can offer to the United States in this case.
So in essence, on a macro level, we have the power, right? We might, on a microeconomic level, we might not have the, as big a purchasing power as people in the United States or in the West. But on a macro level, we can definitely emerge as a big, powerful, formidable force, right?
Yeah, especially using the RCEP as an example, 10 ASEAN, well, they're not strong, but if you combine with China and other 4, South Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, we are the biggest FTA, FTA in the world in terms of GDP, in terms of population.
Right.
So that is the kind of positive leverage that we need to, give out to them. I think the problem is that the Trump administration, I like to use this example. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, when asked about ASEAN, he has no idea about ASEAN. I think that's the mentality, the thinking of the Trump administration. Yes, during my casual talk, I like to condemn the United States. But what I'm saying is that I think when they put out the tariff, they don't think ASEAN as an ASEAN. They think ASEAN as a Southeast Asian nation. I think that's the reason why we got the different tariff for different ASEAN members.
Understood. I want to go back to the 24% and the 1.5 billion ringgit when it comes to the incentive for SMEs that the government is going to push for. Do you think it's enough, even for this stopgap measure sort of period approach?
Very difficult to say. Even Mr. Powell, which is the chairman for Federal Reserve for the United States, he just cannot make his decision on OPR, the interest, because of Trump, flip-flop, always changing. You just imagine the chairman of Federal Reserve. Is it similar to our governor of Bank Negara said, I cannot make a decision on OPR because the Prime Minister is always changing the policy, something like that.
Okay.
So very difficult to answer the 1.5 billion, whether it's enough or not. But I can say that is a stopgap measure. But we should realize that the government is trying to open up the market to help our SMEs. I think that's the best option that SME can hope for a new market.
Now, in terms of accessibility, what's the current challenge, especially when that they have to face when assessing this sort of soft loans and guarantees announced by the government?
I think the requirement will be very stringent. Similar to the requirement that you can work from home during ASEAN Summit. Of course, you can apply for it, but the requirement will vary. You have to prove it. You have to prove it whether you'll be affected or not. So similar to this, SME need to prove it whether they are be affected. But the problem is that the tariff is it's very dynamic. It's changing by the day, by the hours. So it's going to be very difficult. But I'm hoping that 1.5 billion will be used up 100% by our SMEs.
Sure.
Maybe just a stopgap measure until we have a new market that SME can export their products. I think that's the best that we can hope for. But again, I think during Prime Minister debate in Parliament 2 days ago, well, the Prime Minister is not 100% being open, but I think he tried to be honest as best as possible. Because Arina, what I'm saying is that why Lawrence Wong won the election, Singapore Prime Minister, why Mark Carney won the Canada election, and also Albanese won the election, is because they are truthful with their people about the effect of this particular tariff. So yes, the Prime Minister, Datuk Seri Anwar, has been very truthful, and we can know the gravity of this particular issue.
And Prof, maybe just one last thing, because this is Trump's second term, and even from his first term, we know that he has been pushing for more unilateral policies, everything to serve in the best interest of the US. So moving forwards, I think, if you ask me, these 24% tariffs are just the beginning of something even bigger.
Yes.
I think, isn't it wise for us to be prepared for more challenging times ahead?
I don't know. The tariff, I think, is the worst thing that we can face right now.
And
I'm not sure how Trump will put something.
Because he's got 5 years.
I don't know. But again, I think during the first Trump administration, 2017 and 2020, I think we handled Trump very, very good.
Okay.
One example is the West Capella example. We nearly went to war to China, but how we handle it with Mr. Trump, the president at that time, is so superb. So
Right.
we think we can handle that.
So, what sort of liberalized policies that we must now adapt or look into to accommodate this sort of uncertainty of what Trump's going to push out?
I don't think so. We can put forward a strategy how to face Trump. It's very, very difficult. And I use this particular example again. Mr. Powell, the federal chairman, he is basically part of the government. Here is Governor Bank Negara. He also cannot make a decision because his boss, Mr. Trump, is always changing his policy. So for us as a nation, it's going to be more difficult to prepare for it. But I'm hoping for the best.
I just want to say this, but unless we get Elon Musk on our side, Trump seems to be listening to him a lot more than his other
maybe.
advisors.
Yeah,
right?
maybe. Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the end of today's episode. I'd like to thank our guest that was earlier on set, Dr. Krishna Ayumat Saad, as well as Dr. Azmi Hassan for joining us on today's episode. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
And to Hazwin, thank you so much for joining us as well and the show and having to bring so much color as well to the set. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And to our audience back at home, if you like this particular episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to also turn on the notification bell if you haven't already. You'll not only get beyond the headlines, updates, other NSE Online news reports will be delivered to you. Now follow us on X, Facebook, TikTok, as well as Instagram. My name is Amalina Kamal, and I'll see you next week.